Hello and welcome everyone. In this session, we're going to look at the practice assessment 2 for the introduction to bookkeeping. We used to call this paper bookkeeping transaction. Now with AQ 2022, we called it bookkeeping introduction to bookkeeping, normal bookkeeping transaction. But the syllabus is same, the content is same. There is not much changes with the AQ 16 to AQ 2022 for this paper. Anyway, quickly have a look. The assessment information, 1.5 hour exam, 11 tasks, 100 marks. And rest of the information, this is very simple and is applicable for all the exam. And also it says this task is in the assessment are set different business situation where following apply. Business use a variety of bookkeeping system. Double entry take place in general ledger. The VAT rate is 20%. So that means even any question doesn't mention it, this information is applicable for the whole assessment. So the VAT rate has to be standard because we know we have a different type of VAT rate. We have a flat rate, we have a reduced rate, we have a standard rate. But for this exam, we only follow the standard one, that is 20%. All right, let's start with that. So the first question you can see here, task 1 for 10 marks. So let's have a look what is the requirement here. This task is about manual and the digital bookkeeping system. This task contains A to E. Identify which document would be used for each of the purpose below. So we are looking at sort of document for a different purpose. Now, for example, in business, we know we have to keep some record. For example, the valid documents for the businesses could be the invoices, the supplier invoices, the customer invoices, the bank statement, the receipt, this sort of thing we have to keep. And as a company, we have a legal requirement to keep all these documents. For example, if HMRC come for an inspection or investigation, they can tell you, can we see this invoice? Can we see the supplier bill? Can we see the receipt? Can we see the voucher? So you have to show it and you have to keep it at least for 6 years. That's a legal requirement. Of course, you don't have to keep the print copy, but you have to have a record, either physical copy or the electronic copy. You can save in the form of electronic copy, is fine, but you have to have a record. Now, what record is used for what purpose is important. For example, if I like to see how much money I have spent for the whole month from my bank, what could be the relevant documents? The relevant documents would be the bank statement, because bank statement is the documents that will tell me how much I have invested or how much I have spent during the month and how much money in and out from the bank. For example, if I like to see how much the small transaction I have done through cash, so I'm looking at the petty cash book. So the petty cash book will tell me how much I have spent it for a tea, for a coffee, or through the cash. So this sort of thing is important to understand what is the purpose and what documents is relevant. Sometimes, for example, we heard about is called remittance advice. Now, remittance advice is nothing just a confirmation by the customer to the seller, to the supplier. So, for example, if I buy something from a company, for example, I buy something from Microsoft. I buy, for example, 100 license for my business. And once I make a payment for the invoice, and at the same time, I need to let the Microsoft know that I have made the payment. So I send one email to Microsoft giving the invoice number and the account number and letting them know that, oh, I have made the payment. So letting them know that I made the payment, that is called remittance advice, so that Microsoft can update my account, because they have thousands of customers. If I don't tell them I made a payment, maybe my balance will be still outstanding and they'll not update it. So that's why you need to inform them. Sometimes they can ask for the proof. They can say, can you send the remittance? Remittance means the evidence. For example, if we transfer from online banking, for example, if I transfer some money to my friend, so immediately the bank said £100 is transferred to your friend, and the new pop-in window always open, and I can save it or I can share it, and this evidence is called remittance. Remember that it is possible you can show the remittance proof from the bank statement, but sometimes you don't want to. Why? Because on the bank statement, it is possible there could be more than one transaction. So you don't want to send your bank statement to someone and who can look all the activities, who can see like what you're doing, to whom you pay. So you want to just show like a specific transaction that you paid for that invoice. And that's why when the new pop-in window open, it says like the money has been paid to that supplier. It's always better you save it, because in future the supplier can ask for the proof. Anyway, let's get into the question. So the first one, it says identify transactions that have been received into or paid on our bank account. So we understand it. Money in the bank, paid in and paid out on the bank. So if I like to see these documents, like how much money into the bank and how much money paid out from the bank, what could be the relevant documents? The relevant documents will be bank statement for a given period. Of course, given period means that it could be for a month, it could be for a quarter, it could be for a year. So it's for a certain period. If I like to see how much money in to my bank and how much money paid out from the bank, that is bank statement. So looking at the bank statement. The next one, it says summarizing transaction with a supplier and advising them of the amount being paid to them. So that we just discussed. If we made a payment to the supplier and we summarize the transaction, that means it is possible we can pay more than one transaction. For example, if you buy a book from Waterstone, or if you buy the book from CGP, so what happened? You don't just order once, because if you are the customer and if CGP your supplier, you keep buying from the same supplier again and again. For example, in this month you make 10 orders. So if you make 10 orders and if you receive 10 invoice, so you don't want to make like 10 transfer to CGP. So you don't want to make like payment for invoice number 1, payment for invoice number 2. So what you do, you ask the supplier for a statement of account. So you ask supplier, can I have the statement of account? So what is a statement of account? Statement of account, like a bank statement, where it shows all the transaction that is relevant to that supplier. For example, this supplier will tell you, this day you buy from me this amount, this day you buy from me this amount. So it's the whole statement for the whole month. And looking at that, if you check and if you see everything is okay, so you just made one payment. For example, in this month you order 10 times, so you have 10 invoice. So rather than making 10 payment, you just make one payment, so £10,000 for example. So when you make it £10,000, the supplier have no idea for which invoice you make the payment. So on the remittance advice, on the email, you have to mention all the invoices. You need to add it all the invoice number with the amount, and you have to minus or deduct or take away if there is any credit note. If you want to adjust any credit note against the invoice, you have to show it and minus this credit note. So the person who receiving 10,000 from you, he can understand what is the breakdown of all this 10,000. Very important. So that is remittance advice. The next one is says detailing goods supplied to credit customer and the amount to be paid. Now that is invoice. So on the invoice we make the detail like you buy from me this is the description, this is the discount I given to you, this is the VAT rate, and this is the amount you have to pay to me. So I'm giving all the details and I'm telling you have to pay this amount within 30 days or 15 days, whatever is the invoice terms we have. So based on that, the customer looking at the invoice, checking against the delivery note or the order and make the payment. So I'm giving all the breakdown like you have buy this from me, that was the price, that was the quantity, I offer that discount to you, that was the bulk discount, that amount was the prom discount, and after that you have to make the payment by looking at that paper, and we called it invoice. So invoice is sent by the supplier to the customer, so that customer can look at the paper and check everything is okay and make the payment. All right, then we have a authorizing low value purchase paid for in cash. Now remember that if there is any low value payment means, for example, you paid £5 for the postage, for example, you £2 for the coffee, for example, £5 for the stationery. So all the low value normally you paid cash, it's called petty cash. Sometimes it is possible, sometimes the employee, they spend some money from their pocket. For example, they went somewhere for the office work, but they paid something from their pocket, and they come to the office and they give the receipt and said like, can you give £5 to me because I have spent it while I was working, and can you reimburse this amount? So when the office or in the company reimburse this amount to the employee, normally they reimburse from the petty cash, from the day-to-day transaction book. Normally every company have a petty cash box. They keep some money for the daily small expenses. All right, so authorizing low value purchase paid for in cash. All right, so petty cash voucher. Now remember that this word is very important, the voucher. Voucher is very important. Why? Because once you give a payment to someone, for example, if someone bring a receipt for you for £5, and of course like you give £5 just taking the receipt, but later on you might forget after 1 month or after 6 months or after 1 year, if your director asks you like, oh, you give £5 to someone for the petty cash, to whom you paid, and you said like, I forgot because it's been a long time. Remember that. That's why we have to create a voucher. So what is voucher? Voucher is like a table you make on the Microsoft Word, or sometimes you can use a different template. So some information need to be in the voucher. So the date, the description, what you paid for example, for the stationery, for buying the water, to whom you paid, and the quantity, the amount, and the person who is receiving the money, he need to sign. So that you have a small paper now with you, and you staple this paper with the receipt and you just file it. So then later on, if you want to see to whom you paid, or someone asks you, you can open the voucher, you can say like, oh, on that day I paid to that person, and that was the reason behind. So very important, you have to always have a voucher with the receipt for petty cash payment. All right, so more or less that's all our first task. Very simple. Let's move to the next one. The next one we have here, and that is for the creating a code. Very simple. This one could ask you a different way. For example, here they said first 4 letter. In the exam it might ask you for the first 3 letter or 5 letter. We need to just follow the way they're asking, because there is no set of rules, or there is no set of guidance how can you create the customer or supplier code. So every company can have a different strategy. Someone can take the first 2 letters, someone can take the first 3 or first 4. So you need to always consider the information or the requirement. Accounts are to be open for 2 new customer account code. Follow the format below. First 4 letter of the customer name. So from the customer name we have to take the first 4 letter. A 3-digit sequential number that represents the number of customer accounts. So first 4 letter from the name, and we follow what was the last number. We need to just change it and follow it, the last 3 digits. So let's have a look. We have a first customer that will be given. So you can see here we have a Clean Talk Limited. So we take CLEN first 4, and we take 078. So you have to follow 079, then 080. So you're gonna follow from there. So the next one we have here, if it shows they use the capital, take the capital. So we take CLEN HED, and then the last one we have 078. We're going to take 0, 7 and 9. CHED, that is the first 4 from the name, and you follow the number. The next one we have here COURT, actually COUR, 4-digit, and we'll take 0, but this time 79. After 79 is 80. We're going to keep following so that it doesn't match. It has to be unique. Remember that the customer code has to be unique. The way we have a unique account number and the sort code, so that if anyone like to transfer you any money, that comes to you. So sort code represent the branch of the bank, and the account number represent that's your account number. So same way, for example, if we have an account with the British Gas, if we have an account with, for example, any water supplier, for example, the Thames Water or Castle Water, you will see they give you the customer account. Because the reason is, for example, if you call to the customer service and if you said like, oh, my name is Sajid and I like to talk, and they'll tell you, can you tell me your customer number, because we have thousands of people named Sajid, so can you make it more precise? What is your customer number, what is your full name, address, so that you can identify the person more accurately. All right, then the next one we have here, it says each page in the general ledger is numbered starting from 001. The page number is also general ledger account code. Now GL is very important. The reason GL is important, at the end of the day when you're going to prepare our trial balance, that will be followed by the GL. Now we have a day book. So far you have studied the purchase day book, the sales day book, purchase return day book, sales return day book, cash book, discount allowed day book, discount received day book. That's all our day book, and some of our book of prime entry. Book of prime entry means you have to keep this record. Now when we have a day book, later on we move this information from the day book to the GL, to the general ledger. Why? Because it is possible the day book would be very, very big. For example, in one sales day book we can have thousands of transactions, we can have millions of transactions, and we cannot carry all this information, so we need a total balance. So the general ledger actually show the total balance. So you add all the day book and how much is the total. We move this information to the GL, and normally the GL we represent in the T account. So we make a T account, we make a general ledger, and we show the balance CD and BD, and later on this balance BD we move forward to the trial balance, and later on this trial balance we use to prepare our financial statement, where we prepare the profit and loss and the balance sheet. So it's basically linked to each other. And sometimes we use the code, and the code is important. For example, when you'll be working as a bookkeeper, and if the company use any software, for example Xero for the bookkeeping, or for example if the company use the tax scale or any accounting software, most of the software they use the code. For example, for the sales the code is 5700. Now rather than typing the sales or sales return or purchase return, it could be time consuming, but if you remember the code like 5700, it's going to be a little bit faster. So when you enter 5700, it will pick the sales. For that reason most of the software they use sort of code, and that will make the work really, really fast. And always they use the number, not the alphabet, because writing a word could take longer, but if you use the number it's faster. For example, if they give you 5700, 5600, 5100, so you just type, and the writing will automatically pick up based on your number, based on the code. But if you're not sure anything about like which one it is, so if you type sales, the code will be appear automatically on the software. So The reason we use the code to make the work really faster, because when you'll be an accountant, then you want the work need to be really fast, and the code will be helpful, because when you keep doing the same work for 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, the code will be just like kind of very familiar to you, and you know exactly like which code represent what. So it's going to be not difficult to remember at all. All right, so identify the coding system used in the GL. So now we always use the numerical, so that is number, not the alphabet. Remember that. Then we have identify whether each of the following statement regarding digital bookkeeping system is a true or false. Now, a digital bookkeeping system is normally we represent the software, for example, the QuickBook, Sage, or Xero. Nowadays, there is a bespoke software as well. For example, if you work with NHS, or if you work with the council, or if you work with the school, you will see they have a different bespoke software. Bespoke software means like this software is designed only for them based on their requirement. So if you work in a standard software like a QuickBook or Xero or Sage, that will be kind of same for everyone, and of course like that will be digital bookkeeping system as well. Here we don't have to make the T account. If we enter the one transaction, that other one will be automatically picked up. For example, you can connect the business bank to the QuickBook or to the Xero. So what is the advantage of that? The advantage of that is like the bank transaction automatically pop in to the software. So every time you spend some money from your bank card, this transaction automatically move to the QuickBook or Xero. So you really don't have to see the bank statement, because you can see actually the bank transaction on the QuickBook. For example, you spend it £5 for the stationery from the bank. Now the journal entry should be stationery is a debit, is an expense, and the bank should be credit, because the bank is going down, asset is decreasing. But when the bank is already there, if you just choose the stationery expense, debit, and the credit will be choose automatically, because the money going from the bank. So the software already know it. So any money spent from the bank is credit by default. So your bank will be reconciled automatically. You really don't have to do the journal, debit and credit for all of them. You just need to say is it expense or asset. That's it. Alright, so identify whether each of the following statement regarding the digital bookkeeping system is true or false. It is possible to import data relating to bank transaction in order to complete the bank reconciliation process. Definitely it is true, because you can always import. So if you cannot connect the bank to the software, you can export your bank transaction into the CSV file from any bank, and then you can import all the information to your QuickBook or on the Xero, so you can see the bank. But nowadays most of the software allow you to connect the bank straight away, so you can see the real-time transaction. You really don't have to import, but it allow you, of course. It is not possible to post a transaction to the wrong general ledger account. That's not true, that's false. It is always possible. You can post a transaction to the wrong general ledger account. For example, normally we know the purchase is always debit and the sales is always credit. Now when there is a sales return, if you like to make the sales down, so you need to make the opposite transaction. You have to say, no, the sales will be now debit. I know the sales is always credit, but I want to reduce my sales because it's a sales return. So if it's a sales return, you do sales return is a debit, and obviously like if you need to return the money to the customer and you have to see the money is going down from the bank, so bank will be credit. So sometimes if you want to reduce the sales need to be debit. And for example, if you have a purchase is normally debit, but if you want to reduce it, purchase need to be credit. So this is very, very important to understand. And also, for example, you have a sales ledger control or receivables ledger control that we call debtors. Normally debtors is debit, but if I want to reduce it, I need to make the debtors credit. So I cannot tell the software this is debit forever, it is debit credit forever, because I need to adjust sometimes the transaction. For that reason, if we enter the transaction and if we post to the wrong account, it will always accept the software. Sometimes the software will give you some warning. For example, if you forget to enter the VAT rate, it will give you the warning, but doesn't mean it will not work. It will definitely work. A purchase invoice from a credit supplier has been entered into the digital bookkeeping system twice. Now, if you receive a purchase invoice, that means you made a purchase, and if you enter it twice, what does that mean? So that means obviously like your purchase will be overstated, so you're showing more purchase, number one. And obviously it is possible if you enter, maybe it is possible the invoice is already paid. For example, you receive an invoice for 500 and the same invoice by mistake you enter twice. And if someone paid this invoice, for example, twice because they think is a two invoice, then you may be paid for invoice for that invoice that you never received the good for it. For example, you receive once but you pay twice. By mistake you enter. For example, I'm the one who entered the invoice in the system, and my colleague, he checked the invoice from the system and made the payment. So if I'm the one who entered the invoice, and if I by mistake, if I enter twice, maybe my colleague will pay this invoice 2 times because he don't know, he maybe think like it's a 2 invoice there. So here is said like the purchase, the business may pay for the good that never had been received. So maybe I pay for the goods that never been received because I just received once, but by mistake I paid for twice because I entered twice the invoice. Now when there's a digital bookkeeping system, it is possible like or invoice number need to be unique, and obviously like if you try to enter the invoice with the same invoice number, it will not take. For example, if you have a one invoice, you enter on the QuickBook invoice number 1002, and if you try to enter another invoice with the same invoice number 1002, it will give you the warning. It will say no, you already have invoice, but there is always overriding option, or if you change the invoice number, it will take, because it will not care about the date, it will not care about the amount, it will only care about the warning only based on the invoice number. So it is possible mistake could happen. Alright, so that's our first question. So let's move to the next one. The next question we have for task 2 for 10 marks. It said this task is about principle of double entry bookkeeping. This task contains part A to C. Alright, it says at the end of the February, a business had the following asset and liabilities. Now, of course, like we need to understand the difference between the asset and liabilities, because asset is something that business use with the intention to use it for the business, but not to sell it. Don't be confused with the income and asset. For example, if the money into the business, if you make a sales is an income, it's not an asset. Sometimes students get confused. They thought like, oh, money is coming, I'm selling, so it should be asset. It's not asset. If the money is coming to the business because you're making the sales, that's the income. On the other hand, when you have a money on the bank, that's your asset. All right, so anyway, take a look at this one. So you need to find it out, which one is asset, which one is liability. So computer equipment is the asset, so make A. Cash at bank is asset. Receivables means the credit customer, outstanding credit customer. So the people who buy from you and they said I'll pay you later. So if someone said I'll pay you later, you'll call them you are my asset, because in future you're going to pay me something. So until the last day you make the payment, you are my asset. So receivables is asset. Payables is a liability, opposite of the receivable. So when you buy something from your supplier and you have to pay to them, so it is your liability. So you're liable to pay because you buy something. Of course, you are liable to pay for that. So that's your liability. Liability. Loan from the bank, we understand, is a liability. If we take a loan from the bank, we have to pay it back. And fixture and fittings is asset. So this 2, we have a liability. And this 4 is asset. And we need to remember the accounting equation. So asset equal liability plus capital. If I add the liability and the capital, it is equal to asset. Now if I have an asset and if I have a liability, if I like to find the capital, I just need to subtract this 2. So this 2, I need to find the difference, and that will be equal to C. So remember that asset equal liability plus capital. They could give you way around, so you need to just make the calculation. So if I added all of this, so let's find it out how much it is. So if I added all the asset, that gives me $36,934.98. The liability 4,000 plus 2,851.35, so 6,851.35. And the difference between these two, 36,934.98 minus 6,851.35, the difference between asset and the liability is the capital. That is 30,083.63. All right, that's it. 30,083. So there should be one more 0. 083.63. Okay. All right. So the next one we are looking at. Next one we're looking at our next question. Says the first transaction recorded in March related to cash taken from the till by the owner to purchase a new computer for the business. Remember that if this has happened, so you're taking some cash money either from the bank or from the till, doesn't matter. So you're taking some money and buying asset. Remember that cash is an asset. Cash is an asset. So if you're taking some money to buy another asset, so one asset has to go down, another asset will be increased. For example, I take some cash from the till. Till means the machine tab where I keep the cash. For example, if you go to the Tesco or Sainsbury's, you know how the till look like. So they have like the person who sell the product, he takes some cash and keep on the till. Now if I take some money from the till, so money from the till will go down. So my one asset is going down, and I use this money to buy a computer, for example, or buying a machinery. So my another asset, physical asset, is going up. So cash asset going down, physical asset going up. So both asset increase and decrease, because one asset is decreasing cash, one asset is increasing. So both increase and decrease of the asset. Very careful. If we take some money to pay some wages or paying the advertising, paying the rent, then my expenditure will go up and asset will go down. All right, the next one we have here, it says the transactions below have been entered into the cash book with the effect of either increasing or decreasing the asset of cash at the bank. Okay, let's try to understand first. So the first one we understand, paid for advertising. What is advertising? First I need to categorize that. Remember that advertising is not an asset, it's expenditure. We have to be very careful to understand which one is asset and which one is expenditure. So asset represent land and building, property, plant, fixture and fittings, motor car, cash, all are asset. On the other hand, the expenditure could be rent, advertising, bill, wages, salary, internet, mobile phone, everything. So advertising is expense. So it says the transaction below have been entered into the cash book with the effect of either increasing or decreasing the asset of the cash at the bank. So either my bank will go up, increase, or decrease. Now here, of course, like if I pay for the advertising, what will happen? My total expense will go up. Sometimes we say like this month my expense is very high because I spend more. So if I paid for the advertised services, my expenditure will go up. So we say increase the expenditure. So increase the expenditure because advertising is expenditure. Very careful. Do not think like decrease the asset because the bank is going down. Don't think from that way because it's the opposite effect. We are looking at the opposite effect because they already give us the bank. So bank is going down or going up anyway. They don't want to know that. They want to know the opposite effect. What happening to the opposite side? Opposite side is expenditure is increasing. Transferred surplus money to a bank saving account. Now this is simple. Like if I have a surplus money and I can have a current account and I have a saving account. So I transfer some money from the current to the saving. So what will happen? So one asset will going down, the current asset balance will going down, and the savings account balance will go up. So my asset will increase literally. So increase the asset. So on the bank effect is asset is decreasing, the opposite is asset is increasing. Both asset increasing, decreasing because money from one bank going to another bank. So one bank going down, another bank going up. Repay the loan, that's decreasing the liability. Do not look at the bank. We're looking at the opposite effect. So decreasing liability. If I pay the loan, my liability is going down. Received a check from credit customer. Remember that credit customer is also my asset. If I receive a check, my asset will going down. Bank will go up. Remember that. We are not looking at the bank. We're looking at the opposite. Opposite is the credit customer. They are my asset as well. So their balance is going down. So receive a check from the credit customer. That will decrease my asset. So decrease the asset because I cannot say you are my asset anymore because you paid. So decreasing my asset. Received a check for cash sale. That's income. If I receive any money because of the sale, remember that sales is income, purchase is expense always. Receive a refund from a cash supplier for an amount overpaid for a computer repair. Remember that if I paid something, for example, I went to the garage and they repair my car and the bill was £100, but I paid 200, and after that they refund me. So before I say my repair expenditure is 200, but when they refund me 100, I need to reduce my expense. I need to reduce the expenditure. I have to say no, my expenditure is not 200. That was a mistake because they refund me 100, so my actual expenditure is 100. So I'm decreasing my expenditure. Do not think, oh, £100 coming to my bank, so my bank is going up. We are not looking at the bank here. We're looking at the opposite effect. So decreasing expenditure. And that's it. All right, let's move to the next one. The next one we have for task 3. Let's have a look what we have here. 10 marks. It says this task is about processing customer invoice and credit note and entering the day book. Day book means we have a purchase day book, we have a sales day book, discount allowed day book, discount received day book. We have a different day book. All right, sales invoice number 3577 is being prepared from a quotation below. Quotation means like it's the reply of the inquiry. For example, if we like to buy a computer and we send some inquiry to the Dell, to HP, to Lenovo, to Mac, and asking like, I need 100 computer with that configuration. So how much will be the cost? So they send me the quotation. So they say based on your inquiry, that would be the price. So the price they're offering me, that's the quotation for me. Remember that quotation is not an order. Quotation is just an open offer. I can accept it or I can decline it. Alright, so sales invoice based on the quotation. So we have 3000 unit, product 4380, A4 leverage file. Leverage file means the file where we keep all the paper, A4 size, £1.80 each. So each leverage file is £1.80 plus VAT 20% times 3% discount if the payment is received within 10 days of the date of the invoice or net monthly. So basically they are saying either you can pay within 10 days once you receive the invoice. For example, if you receive the invoice on 10th of January, you can pay within 20th of January within 10 days to get 3% extra discount. If you don't want it, you can just pay net monthly. So net monthly normally 30 days you can pay, or at the end of the month you can pay. Identify which type of discount the customer being offered. That's prompt discount. So if the customer said, like if the supplier said pay within a certain time to get a certain discount, we called it prompt discount. When you will be working in the real life, you will see this word on the invoice. Is called, for example, 210 net 30. So when you'll be working, for example, as a bookkeeper or in accountancy practice, they will give you a lot of invoice to enter, and sometimes you'll see bottom of the invoice they say 210 net 30. So you need to understand that's a prompt discount. That means 2% discount you will get if you pay in 10 days. Otherwise you can pay 30 days, no problem. So that's like 210 net 30 or 310 net 30 or 215 net 30, like that. Alright, that's not the difficult one. The next one we have here is a calculate the amount to be included on the invoice. So we need to just find how much is the net amount, and then we add 20% VAT. So the net amount will be 3000 multiply 180. So that will give us 3000 multiply 1.8, 5400. So 5400 we have to write, and the VAT is 20%. So 5400 multiply 20%. That gives me 1080. So let's try once again. 5400 multiply 20%. Yeah, 1080. And if we added this to, that will tell me how much I should ask from the customer. 6480. So the customer will pay me total 6480, and 20% VAT is belongs to HMRC. So this is not for me. I'm just collecting on behalf of the HMRC. So for me it will be 5400. So I'll keep 5400 myself, and the VAT 20% will go to HMRC. If I'm a VAT registered business, remember that the VAT is not a cost for me. But if I'm not VAT registered, then VAT is expense for me. So VAT could be expense, could not be expense for the business. Depends the business is VAT registered or not. When you will do your level 3, there is a paper for tax process. You will learn everything about the VAT. Alright, then we have here, the next one we have here, enter the invoice in the digital bookkeeping system, selecting the correct menu option, making the necessary entry. Okay, so when I buy something, I always need to record it on the purchase daybook because I'm buying. If I receive the invoice from the supplier, so I need to ask myself why I'm receiving the invoice from the supplier. The reason I'm receiving the invoice from the supplier because I made a purchase, I buy something from him. That's why you want the money, and that's why you send an invoice. So it's very important to understand it. So if I receive an invoice from the supplier, I record it on the purchase daybook. And if I send an invoice to the customer because I made a sales, so I record on the sales daybook. Here I received the invoice from the supplier, so it is a purchase daybook. because I made a purchase or I make a sales. Let's have a look. This one, customer invoice. That's not supplier, customer invoice. That means I made a sales. It's a sales debit. Very careful. If I made a sales, I'm sending the invoice to the customer so the customer can make the payment. That's a sales debit. If I receive a invoice from the supplier, is a purchase debit. So I made a purchase. All right, here they said like customer code. You just need to copy. It's nothing difficult. Customer code here we have here GRA01. So GRA01. Then the general ledger code is a leverage file, so should be stationery. So office stationery. Invoice number, need to look at the invoice, and the invoice number is 3577, and the net amount is 5400 that we have calculated already, and the VAT code is standard. Remember that at the beginning of the question they said we need to always take the VAT is standard 20%. All right, I think that's it for our task number 4 or 3 actually. Let's move to the next one. The next one we have here, it says this task is about processing receipt from customer. Okay, this task contains part A to B. Jax & Co. has received 2 checks, 12,801.62 from JPT product. As detailed in the remittance advice below, the customer has not been offered from discount. Okay, basically one of the customers, they paid me some money. How much they paid? They paid total 12,801.62, and the total of these two is basically these two. If we added these two, it will be exactly 12,801.62. And they send us 2 remittance advice. One is remittance advice number 1010 and one is 1067. And they're giving the breakdown why they paid us 12,801.62. And they are saying we paid for the invoice number 3922, 3987 and 4009. We also paid for the invoice 2976, 4126. They're telling us this is the invoice they paid for total, so that I can offset or I can make the balance against all the invoices that I have on my record. So I can reduce the customer balance by 12,801.62. But before I do that, because this is based on the JPT company record, but I have a record for them. So when they have a record for me, I have a record for them. So for them, of course, like it's a liability, so they keep a record called purchase ledger control account. And for me, I keep a record for them as a sales ledger control account because they are my customer. So I'm expecting some money from them. Now it says company policy is to match each transaction with the remittance advice number or to query any underpayment or overpayment. So of course I need to check. I cannot just believe all this invoice. I just don't want to believe like all this invoice they are saying is actually paid for that. As a bookkeeper, I need to check one by one, like how much was the invoice for 3922, this amount is correct, this amount is correct. I need to check myself. So now I want to check this. I want to go down and check based on my record. Okay, so we can see here based on my record what is happening here. So you can see the opening balance. The opening balance was 88423. That was the opening balance. And I want to check is this amount is paid or not. So on the remittance advice 10110, I don't see this amount. But the next one I can see exactly 88423, this one. So I want to allocate this one. I said yes, this amount is paid. So I want to allocate. So allocate allocate full 1067. So on this remittance advice 1067, I have this money 88423. So I say this is paid. The next one we have here, invoice 3922, amount 9996. So they're telling me invoice 3922 is here and they paid 961378, but actual amount was 999. So basically they are telling me they paid for that invoice 3922 9613.78, but they paid me 9613, but actual on the detail I can see it is 9996. So, and this invoice were on the remittance 1010. Now obviously, like you can see, is not matching exactly, because on my record it says 999622. So 999622, and they paid me 9613.78. But I don't know, is there any credit card or not, credit note, because we didn't check yet. But I need to see, is there any credit note here? So I can see I have a credit note that is corrected against the invoice 3922. So I want to check that, and the amount was 382.44. So minus 382.44. And we want to see, after the credit note adjusted, how much is the new balance. So 9996.22 minus 382.44, and that gives me exactly 9613.78. So we understand actually what they did. They adjust this credit note against the invoice, and that's why they paid me a little bit less. It is understandable, because if there's a credit note, if the customer return, they will not gonna pay me full amount, they will pay me less. So any credit note they can offset or adjust to it or against any invoice. It don't have to be the same invoice. Alright, so I can say this one on the 1010, allocate full amount 1010. And the next one we can see here, we have the next one we have here, invoice 3987. So 3987, I can say we have here 375, but my record is 355. So it's look like they overpaid, and there is no more credit note or debit note, so I'll say the overpaid. So I'm gonna say query for overpayment. I need to make inquiry why they paid more. The next one we have here, invoice number 4009. Here my amount was 896 and they paid me 892, so they paid me a little bit less. So I need to make a query for underpayment. Don't try to adjust, don't try to add all this amount and try to see is it match with the 12. Don't do it. You have to individually check why they paid me more or less, unless if there is any credit note. And then we have a credit note, and that is allocated to invoice number 1010. We know that already, we did it. Allocate full amount on invoice number 1010 minus the credit note. And finally 4126, the amount was here 1037.78, and they paid 35 and 70 is match exactly. So I'll say that's no problem at all. So 67. Yeah, I think that's all. So that's how we need to make it done. All right, let's move to the next one. The next one, it says Portway product has received payment from 2 customers that have incorrectly calculated prompt payment discount, resulting in underpayment. Okay, complete the table below by calculating the amount. That should be easy one. So we need to just calculate the prom discount. So let's do it. It says 2.5% and 2%. Now the amount paid is this. Invoice amount was this and amount paid this. So let's take a look. The invoice was 9876 and we should get 2.5% from discount. Now you can minus 2.5% from here, how much it is, or you can actually multiply with 97.5%. that I prefer, because doing the calculation for 2.5% and then minus again, then get the figure. So you have 3 calculations to find the figure. But if you know, if I minus the 2.5% from 100%, so I just need to pay 97.5%. That will make your work really fast and you'll save some time. So I always advise my student in the class to do this way, so you can follow that as well. So 97, so we do 9876 multiply 97.5%, and that should be 9629.1. So amount should have been paid 9629.10, but actually the amount paid is 9579.72. So 49.38. So we need to do a very simple calculation. Based on the invoice amount, we need to multiply how much I'm supposed to pay. So that correct amount is this one, but amount paid is this one. So find the difference. So it's supposed to be 96, I paid 95, so I still need to pay 49 more outstanding. Same thing for this one. The invoice amount was 2190 and multiply, it was 2%, so I need to pay 98% because I'll get 2% discount. So 98% should give me 2146.20. So 2146.20, and I paid 2080, so I need to pay a little bit more. The difference is 65.70. That's it. It's quite simple. Try to follow this way. Just minus the discount, multiply with that. It will save a lot of time for you. Alright, so let's move on. The next one. The next one we have here, that is task 5. Let's quickly do this one. So this task is about processing the supplier invoice or credit note and entering on the daybook. So supplier invoice, purchase daybook. Remember that. The supplier invoice below has been received. So we receive an invoice from the supplier. So to Sharp Property Management, invoice number this. So we receive an invoice from ED Service. Sharp Property is the company. We are Sharp Property. Remember that. The supplier name always will be in the top, in the middle, and the customer name will be always on the left to right. So under the supplier, dated 25th of May, building repair carried out in May 1952, VAT 20%, total is this. Okay, which book we're going to record? We definitely know purchase day book, supplier invoice, because I have to pay a bill. Then we have here, complete the day book, making 4 entry to record the invoice, total, VAT, and the net column. That's quite simple. So we have ED Service, invoice number we already know, that was 18384. So 18384, and the total was 2342.82, 2342.82, 42.82, and the VAT was 390.47, 390.47. The net is the difference between the total and the VAT, 1952.35. Sometimes you might thinking like, oh, maybe it look like very easy, I just need to copy from the invoice and enter the information. But that's how it will be some question. So don't think like it's a very easy, or maybe you try to be more clever to think more, maybe it's not the right way, but it's not. You're doing just level 2, so you don't have to think too much in depth. Make it simple. So we have total, so make it total all of this. That will be 9645.66. Then the VAT 1607.61, 8038.05. All right. The next one we have here, the good return note and the credit note below relate to the inaccurate goods supplied to H & Co. on 26th of May. Okay, so it's a good, it's a return note. Good return note, GRN. So GRN could be very confusing if you don't tell, because GRN we use for the good received note as well. So you need to be very careful. The GRN can represent the good received note or the good return note for both. Good return to S Trading, 9 boxes of 8 liter. So 9 boxes of 8 liter return not as ordered, so they just receive it without order. Price per box 24.80. A box of 8 plus 20% VAT. Okay, so 90 item, and product this 3.10 each. This VAT is 5.5, and total identified to discrepancy. So it's not matching, isn't it? So of course, like there's a discrepancy. So here it was 9 and here is 90. So there's a problem with the quantity. There's a problem with the quantity. So this one is not matching. So we will say the quantity of the item, and we issue the credit note. Remember that we issue the credit note when someone return. So if they return me this amount, these boxes, I should issue the credit note only for that. So credit note means like I return something, so I'm not going to pay for that, so that the supplier give me a credit note. It's like paper, so that when the next invoice come to me, I can minus from there. So the quantity is not matching, number one, and here it was 26 May, but here is 16 May, so the date. And the product type, so it was C4736, C4736, so this is matching, no problem. So product type is okay, so it's not a problem. And the item price, so we have a 8 and 24.80 for box of 8. So let's try that. 24.8 divided by 8, that is 3.10. So 24.80 divided by 8. So per box is 3.10, and we can say 3.10, so it's matching as well. It's not a problem. The problem with the quantity, the problem with the date. Other than this looks okay. All right, so I think that's not the difficult one. Okay, so you can see here, that's how we can answer all the question. We'll stop our session here today. Maybe I'll try to make another video for the next 4 question or 5 question we have for the assessment. Hopefully this information will be helpful for your understanding. Remember, just not to practice, try to understand the logic, because when you'll be working actually in the workplace, you need to know how is it work, why is it work, where it's coming from. So you need to understand it, not just memorize it and do the question and you think you can solve it. You need to understand the other way as well. So for every single thing when you read, try to understand what is the meaning of that. why I'm doing it, and what is the impact as an accountant. So you will be working as an accountant, of course, like you're doing level 2 now, then later on level 3 and level 4, the knowledge level will be increased. But if your basic is clear now from the beginning, it will help you a lot for the future work and for the future study as well, because what you're learning the bookkeeping in level 2, you're going to learn the same thing in level 3, and on the level 4 again you have to learn the bookkeeping. So it will help from now. If your basic is clear, if your understandability is strong, you will be very much in a good position compared to the other student who just passed the exam without understanding. Alright, so thank you very much for watching. If you have any question, feel free to email me. I'll try to help you if I can. And thank you.